Hey everyone, I'm Sagnik and I'm the co-founder and CTO here at WorqHat. And today we are going to continue on with the last part where we mostly talked about how you can get started with WorqHatAI APIs, how you can use them with Node.js as a backend, and how you can build a command line tool where you can send a question or a command to the AI model to the backend using a simple fetch request, and you can wait for a response that comes within the next second or two. So that is what we worked on in our last video, and I'll leave a link to that video in the description below. But in today's video, what we'll be working on mainly is we'll be creating our own natural language to code generator application, which essentially takes your questions in the form of natural language, be it in any language that you want. It can be in English, it can be in Bengali, it can be in Hindi, or whatever you want to type it in. And what it will do is the AI model will take your request and it will convert it into simple languages, into a simple coding language of your choice. Maybe you can choose say Java, or you can choose JavaScript, or you can choose Python. So whatever the language you want to go ahead with, you can actually add it over there and the AI model will generate the code for you. So that's what we'll be working on essentially, and we'll be using WorqHat AI models as a base work for building this project. So a few things that we want to keep in mind while we are working with this project is our main tech stack. Our main tech stack will be mostly around, will be dependent on say NextJS. And another thing that I would like to point out is that whenever you guys are working on any kind of project, make sure you push it to GitHub. And also we do run this as certified courses as well. So in case you have built an amazing project, if this is something that you want to get certified about, yes, I have built this project myself, feel free to reach out to the WorqHat team via the email. It will be mentioned in the end of the documentation, and we will help you with feedbacks. We'll guide you on where you could have done better, and again provide you with the proper certificate on what on your achievement of the project that you have made. So I think that is more about what we will be working on and what is it that we'll be doing. So, and also to make it easier for you, what I'll do is I'll be completely following the documentation that we have on our Learners Academy. So if I go over here, you will find that there's a Learners Academy that we have, and this is the project that we'll be starting with, natural language to code translator. So what I'll do is I'll go step by step with the steps that is mentioned in the documentation there. So that is what we'll be doing, and I'll make sure that it becomes easier for you to follow along. In case you have missed out anything, you can either roll back the video or you can actually go to the documentation and start understanding how the code looks like. All right, so I think this is where we can start off with. And what I'll do is you can choose any code editor of your choice. It's completely up to you, but for the sake of simplicity and to make sure that, as most of the people across the world are mostly dependent on VS Code as their primary IDE, what I'll do is I'll be mostly working with GitHub Codespaces. Now for those who don't know about what GitHub Codespaces are, GitHub actually came up with Codespaces quite some time back, and this is something that allows us to build application directly within our web browsers itself, so that we don't have to run up another instance in our IDEs. So what GitHub Codespaces does is it runs an instant development environment, and we can start coding right over there. Also it works with your current Git repositories as well, so you can directly create a code space from an existing repository that you have. So I think, but I would suggest, as you will be working on this project and this is something that you will be going ahead and showing to your potential friends, your employers, and to your college professors, I would suggest you get started off with some IDE of your own that is on your device, be it say VS Code, be it say WebStorm, or any IDE of your choice. That's completely up to you. So I think that actually sums up everything that we'll be doing in this video. So starting off, I'll just create my own repository. So I'll just move on over here to what we'll be building, and I think this is what we'll be working with. So how do I start off with? So in order to start it off, you have to make sure that Node.js and npm is installed on your device. You can go ahead and download Node.js from the internet by visiting www.nodejs.org. So this is the website that you have to visit to download. Irrespective of what device you are on, Node.js is available across every devices. And for being on the safer side, we generally suggest ki you download the LTS version. What does LTS version mean? LTS means the lifetime support version. So that happens to be the most stable version as of that time when you're downloading. So as of the time when we are recording this video, the LTS version happens to be 18.16.1. So I think that is it, and I have already got npm downloaded. So I think I can get started off with code spaces. And what's the next step that I have to do? Okay, next I have to do is I have to install NextJS. So I'll just get started off with my code spaces. And right, that's my code spaces being set up. My code spaces is connecting. Right, I don't need to do this, I'll just skip it. And right, you might have noticed that this looks very similar to VS Code, since Microsoft VS Code and code spaces are based on the same architecture, based on the same tech stack. This is what makes it easier for it to to look similar, and that is why we also prefer, when we are going ahead with some coding tutorials, or when we are just spinning up instances just to show people a demo or create something to just give a proper example, we always do it on code spaces. But again, suggestion for students, don't do it on code spaces, do it on instance on your own device. Okay, so yeah, so first what I have to do, what is the first step that I have? So first I have to install Next. So Next is a popular framework you might be aware of. This is currently in the growth, and a lot of people are building different kinds of applications with it. So Next is a sort of a React application, and in order to get started with Next, what you have to just do is you have to go ahead and type npm install -g. -g means global, so you have to install in the Next globally, and I'll just hit enter, and I have to wait for npm to Next to get downloaded, so you can move ahead with it. And my Next has been downloaded. So now what I can do is now I have to create a new Next.js project. In order to create a new Next.js project, what did you have to do? You have to create the npx. Npx is an npm command that is a sort of a file creation, and you use npx whenever you want to perform activities with npm itself. And then I'm asking it to create a Next app, and the app's name is my code translator. Again, you can name this anything that you want. So for the sake of example, what I'll do is I'll type it as npx create Next app, and I'll name it code demo. And once I hit enter, it will ask me it's asking me to install the packages. So what I'll do is, do I want to proceed? Yes, I want to proceed. And do you want to use TypeScript? No, this is based on pure JavaScript and pure React.js to make it easier for you all. So would I be using ESLint? Yes, ESLint is very important because it helps you to make sure that your coding follows the basic standards. Will I be using Tailwind CSS? Yes, the entire application is based on both Tailwind CSS and standard CSS as well. So depends on what language, what CSS framework you're comfortable with. You can actually go ahead with either simple CSS, or you can also choose to go ahead with Tailwind CSS. As an organization, we prefer Tailwind CSS because it gives us a much more class based approach to the designing process that we have, and it makes the entire process faster. So that's why we are mostly dependent on Tailwind CSS. So I'll just hit yes over here. Do I want to use the source directory? Yes, my entire architecture, the entire the code base that I have is completely based on source directory. So in case you want to understand how the code base looks like before getting started with it, what you can do is you can scroll exactly to the bottom, and here you will be able to see a reference code, and this is where we have uploaded the entire code itself. And you can visit this project anytime. You can visit the GitHub repository as well to see how the code structure looks like and how you want to go ahead with it. So again, moving back to the first again, so I'll go down, and where was it? Right, I was over here. Right, so I was doing this. I have completed this, and I want to set up my game. So yes, I'll be using a source directory to create it. And do I want to use an app router? No, I don't want to use an app router right now because it's a very simple single page application that we have. So there aren't any multiple routes. So in case you're building an application where you've got multiple routes, maybe you have one sign up page, you have a login page, you have a page where users can maintain their own dashboard, and a page that answers the questions of the users, feel free to go ahead with the app router. And would you like to customize the default import alias? No, I don't. and now it's installing the dependencies. So if you can notice, it's installing React and React DOM itself. So as I mentioned, Next.js is based on React itself. Tailwind CSS and post CSS are important for compiling the Tailwind CSS files and the classes. So I think let's wait while this thing gets downloaded. What I'll do is I'll move this to the screen itself. And we are good to go. So now what we have to do is, now we have to start working on how we can build this application. Okay, so if I look into code demo, what all do I have here? So here I have a public folder. I can see the favicon.io, ICO. I can see the next.svg. I can see a version.svg as well. And in the source folder, what I'll see is I have got pages and I have got styles. So styles are where all my global styles are involved. So as you can see, Tailwind has already been added beforehand because we mentioned that we want to use Tailwind over there. So Tailwind has already been installed. Apart from that, what else do we have here? We also have the background schemas. So when you load Next.js pre-builds a background screen for yourself, so that when you run it, you are able to see something rather than seeing an empty space. So Next.js actually creates that on its own in order to give you a sample. We will understand all of it right now. And then what we will do is I'll just run npm run dev. So okay, something has gone wrong. Alright, since I am outside this thing, so I won't be able to run it. So what I have to do is I have to go to where my package.json is. So my package.json is currently present within code-demo. So I need to cd into that code-demo. I'm inside it. Now what I can do is I can npm run dev and my server has started. So what I'll do is I'll open this browser in public and connecting. Let's see what comes here. See, so my template that I had, that template is ready over here, and we can already see it key. This is what we want to get started with, and this is the page that will be completely editing. We don't have any routings in them, so every time I open on the /route, that is the root route, it should always show me a page where I can create my entire application. And this has said key I can get started by editing the source/pages/index.js path. So I think it's good to go. Let's do this. And so what I'll do is I'll go to my index.js, but before that, let's start off with the basic explanations of what app and app.js and all these things are. So the app.js file that you have actually states that, see, this is where I want to import my globals.css file, and in case you have something that you want to render across all pages, we generally put that in underscore app.js. APIs are when you want to put in multiple APIs on the backend. So suppose there is a request handler that you want to put in, that is where you put in the APIs, but we won't be requiring APIs for this use case. So I can just go ahead and delete this. I will delete the APIs folder, and document.js is the main index.js script where all of these components are going to get loaded. Now if you see over here, I have a head, I have my HTML. This is a standard HTML document template that we have. You always have a HTML and then a head and then a body, and within the body you have all the script tags and the body tags and the div tags, the span tags, and so on and so forth. So what we will do is we'll be mainly editing this main tag. Now we generally prefer that you don't edit the main tag within the underscore document.js, but instead you create a separate index.js and you keep editing within that. So when I go into index.js, what you will observe is that I have a exported default function home, and this is where I have sent the main function. And when you expand main, this main is the one that is getting displayed over here at underscore document.js. So with this, I think I've explained most of how Next.js works and what Next.js actually is, and we can go ahead with starting with how to code and how we can build our own application. So now that we are ready to go and we have set up our entire Next.js application, now it's time to get started with how we can modify the index.js file so that we can start building the homepage component, and we can get started with the different parts of the entire application that will be there when we render it to the front end part of it. So what we'll do is, first we will remove all the junk that is there on the index.js page. Maybe like when I call about junk, it's not actually junk, it's the basic framework template that they put in there, but we don't need all of this. So what we'll do is we'll remove everything that's there and we'll start from scratch, and then we will start configuring the custom fonts that we have, and after that we'll add the homepage component. So I think that it's time we start with it. So if I move over here and I see globals.css, now what does global.css do? Global.css is putting in a body color at the background, and it is also stating that if it's a dark mode, then you should put in this RGB and the background RGB like this, and if it's in the light mode, then this is what should be the color of the front end. Moving to index.js, we have a lot of things present over here, but I don't think I'll be needing any of this. So what I'll just do is I'll just command A and delete. So first and foremost, what was okay, and is it returning an error? Is it an error? Yes, it's an error because there's nothing to be rendered on the front end. So I'll have to start with something. So first what we need to do is we need to import, if you want to add in images, I have an image that I want to add there. So what I'll do is I'll import image from next/image, put it within the apostrophes, and right, so I've imported image. And what I need to do is I need to import fonts as well. We can add in the multiple kinds of fonts that we want to add to the application. So I'll be using the standard inter font that is available on Google, and NextJS provides some of the fonts to you right out of the box, so you can start with those fonts. So I'll import inter, and I'll be using it from next/font/Google. Right, and my font is up as well. So I can see that my client has been compiling it, so I'll just go and check here what's coming. And as you can see, it's okay. I don't have an export defined, so it's going to return me an error. So I have to first create an export part of it. Also, yeah, coming to the font part of it, so I'll declare the font that I have. I'll have constant inter is equal to, I have imported the inter function over here, so I'll just call it here inter. And if I want to add in some multiple subsets, so I'll be using the Latin subset of this. So subsets, and I'll add the Latin subset. I'll add Latin over here, LATIN. So and I'm good to go. Right, so that's the part where we set up the project that we want to go ahead with. Now moving on to what we want to build, and we want to build the entire homepage component. So moving on to the documentation, what is it that we have written here? So right now we need to create a function homepage, and when we create the function homepage, we'll export that homepage to the front end part of it. So what I'll do is I'll just copy this piece of code and I'll explain it over there. So I'll just command v8. So what I've done is I've defined a function called homepage. So this function is what I'll be rendering on the front end part of it, and I'll make sure that this is what will be rendered. Now when I look at homepage as a function, I have a main class within it. So when I described earlier, you might have remembered that we need to put in a main over here, and this is the main declaration that I have right now over here. So what I'll do is I'll just stop my server and I'll start it again. Control C. I'll control C this, and I'll start npm run dev again, and my server is started. My server has started compiling and everything's up and running. So if I go over here and if I hit on refresh, I should be able to see the change. Okay, so here you go. This is the sample code. I can see that any changes I am making over here, I am able to see it right here as well. So I'll again make a change. So this is the place where we will be adding the code translator, and it's compiled, and if I go here, it's there. All right, don't mind the spellings, but right, this is what we will be working on. And if you want to take away the designing part of it, and you don't want to show the designs that are there, you can just go over here to the globals.css and you can remove this entire root part and the body part of it. So what it will essentially mean is you will not have any base CSS framework or any base CSS that you will be working on. Just make sure that you don't remove the tailwind configuration files that represent over here, because it's very important when you are compiling tailwind files, and these are the classes that the tailwind components are mostly dependent on. So if I again go over here and see, no background color, no black color, anything's there. All right, so that's completely up to you. If you want to keep that black part of it, it's up to you, but since we are building a simple application, I'll just make sure that I remove it. So moving on, what's the next step that I have to do? So we have defined the homepage function. We can make changes and we can see it on localhost 3000. When you're working on your local devices, the port that you have to visit to will be displayed over here, that it's available on HTTP localhost 3000, and you can visit that port and see the changes happening in real life, because NextJS supports fast refresh. So anytime you make changes in the code, the changes will get reflected automatically on the web browser, where you are seeing the compiled product in real time. So now what I'll do is okay, fine, it's cool. I already removed the bodies gradings and everything, body color and the background colors. So the next step asks me to put in some styling to the home page, and I'll be using standard HTML CSS to put in the styling. So I'll just copy this. I'll go to globals.css again. Mind it, you don't remove this and you add the code below it. So what does this say? I've said that the HTML and a body that I have should be 100% in height, should not have any margins and paddings, and my body should be gradient, and my body gradient should be having 3-4 colors, and it should be a background size cover. So I think it should be good to go. Right, so good, looks good enough. I have added the background color and everything. I can change this to make it look something else. So what I'll do is I'll just put it a lighter shade and go to, and see the color changes. Again, up to you how you want to design it. This is just a standard design template that we have and that we keep using every time we work with. Now the next step that we have to do is, what we have to do as the next step, right, so I've completed the step 7 part of it. We are going fast. Now I've set up the background size, I've done everything. For more detailed explanation, instead of me going about in this video, you can take your own time and understand what every piece of code does. We have made sure that we have described every part in a much more detailed way in our documentation. I'll leave the link to the documentation somewhere on the screen as well, and I'll also leave it in the description below, so it's easier for you to access and work with it later on. Now I have to start adding the homepage components. Now this is where the entire complexity part of it starts. So what I'll do is I'll first copy paste the code here from here to the main application, and then I'll take up each and every part and I'll start explaining you how each of it works. All right, so what I'll do is I'll just click on copy and I'll go over here and I'll go to index.js and I'll create another new function called right. All right, so I've created a new function called home components. All right, but as you might be seeing here, home components declared but its value is never read. So what does this code base that I've put in here have completely? So the first thing that it has is I've declared a class name text black, where I have put in the headings that I want to put into the application. So I've added the first heading. Now these are all tailwind classes. Text 4XL means that you want the font size of the text to be a certain size. Now if I hover over it, I'll be able to probably see it. If you're on a local device, it actually shows you what is the size that you want to make it to, but 4XL essentially means 24px in normal CSS classes. So it's completely up to you how you want to do it. So I have added a heading, I have added a subheading to this, and then I have created a container. Now once I expand into the container, what all do I have? I have another block input box up on top. So when you look at code generators, what it should have? It should have an input box on top. It should have a drop down menu where you will be able to select the language that you want to work with, and below that you will be having a code editor where the compiled code and the generated code will be visible. So this is where I'll be putting in all the components, say the question box, the drop down menu, and the code editor part of it. So this is what I am declaring as the home components. So I have the input box over here. Going down, I have my own language selector. Since this is a demo project and this is something that we want you all to work with and we want you all to use this as a product as well, we have added a larger number of languages. Up to you if you want to add in just 3 languages, you want to add in just 4 languages. It's completely up to you how you want to build it. And then I have the generate button, which means that it will ask the model key. Yes, this is the input that the user has sent. Now you send this request to the AI model at WorqHat server and fetch me a response, and this is what the generate button is going to do. So I have the code over here, and I think we're good to go. So I have not yet added the code editor part of it, just because I don't want to I don't want to increase the complexity of it right now, but we'll keep on adding things as we move ahead with the project. So now if I render this on the front end, and is this compiled? No, I'll not hit save. Yeah, once I hit save, it will start compiling it, and the fast refresh process happens. And if I go over here and I hit on refresh, yeah, it's refreshing. So see, nothing is being shown here. Why is nothing being shown here? The reason why nothing is being shown here is because I have declared all of it in home components, but the home components part is declared, but its value is never read. This means that the main application does not have home components called anywhere within itself. So now my next step should be to call home components in such a way so that it is visible on the UI that we are currently building. So we have again described everything that you want to go ahead with and how you want to create it. So now see, we have included the home components within main. Now make sure whenever you are adding in any components, make sure that you always put it within the main classes, because if you remember underscore document.js, that is where we had added the main class, and apart from main we hadn't added anything, which means that main is something that's going to be rendered on the front end part of it, and any other components that you want to render within it should go inside of main. So if you look at it, I have main declared somewhere over here, right? So this is my main that is being declared, and I've written this stuff, that is, this is the place we'll be adding the code. But instead of this, I want to render my entire code, so I will put in home components and I'll close this. Now if I hit on Command S, again it has been compiled, and I'll go over here and I'll hit, and it's refreshing automatically. See, the bare minimum and the bare metal application that we want to build is already here. The generate code button is here, the question box is here, the headlines and the sub headlines are there, and the select language button with all the options are also present right now. But it does not look good. I do understand it doesn't look good. So now what we have to do, we have to go ahead and put in the CSS classes. Now I want to make it easier for all of you, so I won't be only focusing on Tailwind CSS, but we'll be using plain CSS as well along with Tailwind CSS. But another suggestion, don't always try using them, because maybe the code that you put in CSS might end up breaking your Tailwind CSS and vice versa. So again, if possible, try using only one of them. Most people generally go ahead with CSS. There are a lot of organizations who have started switching into Tailwind CSS as well, so it's again up to you how you want to do it. So right, I have the globals.css code over here. So this is how I'm going to declare my container. I have the color text black, the max width should be 90%, and margin up on top should be 70, 20 pixel, and the background color, and there should be a border radius as well. Border radius means it should be a bit rounded at the sides. I'll just go and add it to globals.css, Command V, and Command S. Again, it's compiling. I'll go and see how it renders itself. Right, so see, my compilation process is complete and it looks neater. Everything is in center, everything is organized, everything is in a perfect line as I wanted it to be. Now moving on to what I have to do next. Now my next step should be I have to add the code editor. Now there are multiple types of code editor that are available on the web that you want to use. There is Code Mirror, there is Ace Editor, but for the scope of this project, and just because we have been using Monaco Editor by Microsoft for a very long time, this is something that even we prefer internally for all projects that we build. So Monaco Editor is created by Microsoft, and it's an open source editor that you can plug and play into any kind of React applications. So I'll just go ahead and install Monaco Editor. So I don't need to stop this. I'll go ahead and create another terminal. So in case you are on your local devices, you need to create another terminal tab, and you can just click npm install Monaco Editor. Or in case if you are if you are not able to open a multiple terminals, what you can just do is you can close down, you can just shut down the current terminal that you have, and you can actually go ahead and run the npm install command, and post that you can again go ahead and start the npm run dev process. But I won't be going into so much complexity because I can run multiple terminals over here. Most devices these days, most operating systems these days allow you to run multiple terminal shells as well. So I don't think this should be a big of an issue for you all as well. Now that my process of installing the Monaco editor is complete, I can go ahead with adding Monaco editor to my application. So I will add import dynamic from next dynamic, and I'll just copy paste it over here just to save time. I'll be copying stuff so that when you do understand that whatever we are building over here is exactly what you have been provided in the blog, and this is what you should be able to follow anytime you come back to this video or anytime you come back to this application. So server side. Okay, now I'll just explain the code. So I have a dynamic part because why I'm importing dynamic, the content of the code editor that I have should be dynamic. Every time it's going to change. So it's the editor that I have which should be dynamic, and I'm importing Monaco editor for that, and I've set up SSR as first. Now what is SSR? SSR stands for server-side rendering. There's no use of server-side rendering over here because when we built WorqHat, we wanted to make sure that no matter what tech stack you're working on, no matter what is the scope of learning you have focused on, but what is the language you have focused on so far, we wanted to make sure that WorqHatAI is available to everyone across different organizations, across different developer groups, irrespective of the languages you're working with. And that is why we built it in such a way so that it is accessible across front-end languages as well. So we don't need to use server-side rendering in order to send a request to the WorqHat backend and to receive a response from it. So as a result, I have to set SSR as first. I don't need a server-side rendering over here. So I think that is what you have to do over here. Now I have to create a code editor class name inside my home component. So if you remember, I'll just copy it, and if you remember, I had a home components over here, and here I had a div. So always remember that whenever you are putting in anything within a function, say home components or ABC function, it should always start with a div, and that div should always contain all the sub elements that you have. So here my first sub element was the h1, my second sub element was div, my third sub element was container, and below it this container had a sub element called the text box and the language selector, and then it had the button. Now what I need to do is I need to add the editor as well. So what I'll do is I'll add it after the button that I have. Now you can choose to add it over here, you can choose to add it outside the container as well. Again, it's up to you, but just for styling purposes, because I've centered the entire thing, I'll be adding it after the button that generates code. Now I'll copy and paste it over here. This thing I need to format the styling part of it maybe. So do I have format document? I have format document, right? So it's formatted. So now I'll just explain this code a bit. So what I'm doing is I've called the editor class. Now I have declared editor over here as the dynamic editor of Monaco editor, and by default I've put in the language as JavaScript. This language is something that will be variable every time the code is generated depending on what language you have chosen. And the theme should be VS Dark. I can put it as VS Light, I can put it anything I want to, but make sure that you are using the themes that have been mentioned into Monaco editor, otherwise this will return an error. Most probably you can use VS Dark or VS Light depending on your taste, but again, up to you. Now options are read only is true, which means that you won't be able to edit this code later on. Once it's generated, only code that can be put in there can be put in using JavaScript. Word wrap means you want to wrap every word, and every word should be below a particular, if it extends beyond a particular length. So if I just hit on command S, it's compiled, and if I run over there, so my code editor is cool and visible. Now again, if I want to make it light, I can put in VS Light over here. I hit command S, I'll see what's coming in, and it's a light code editor. So again, just for the sake of aesthetics and to make it visually appealing, I'll just revert back to making it dark, because after all, who likes light color code bases these days? I don't judge you for that, but right, most of us use dark color code bases. So moving on, VS Dark, and we are back to our old code base. My languages are visible, my questions are available here. What is write a bubble sort algorithm in JavaScript. So I can type anything I want to, but I can choose my language as well. Sorry, it's JavaScript, right? I can hit generate code, but see, you can see that nothing is happening because we haven't added the the rendering code or the request that is being sent to the WorqHatAI endpoint. None of the backend part of it has been done. So we'll start working on the code JavaScript part of it that actually runs the code now. So this part of it is complete, and it looks exactly like this. Just the difference will be the color combinations because I have decided to go ahead with a different color, but you can choose the different colors that you want to add in. You can add in your own shades of blue. You can make it customized for your own taste, and it's up to you how you want to do it. So now you have to handle the button clicks. So again, I'll create a new function called handle generate code click, and that is where I'll be taking in the values from the text box, and I'll be taking in the values from the language box as well. So I'll just copy it and I'll paste this function over here. Now you might be asking why I'm pasting all functions on top of it and not below. This is because I always, as a personal choice, that I want to always put in functions in a reverse order so that I can make sure this function is calling from the top, so I can go up and I can find the function much more easily. But again, there's no requirement to put sequences in such a way. It's up to you. So I'll just put in my function over here, and what I'm doing is I am calling for language and I'm calling for question text. Now when I look at text box, I'm calling text box 1 by id. So it's document.get element by id. I'm calling text box 1 and I'm calling for the value that's within it. So if I see this is the id of the language that I have, so I'll get the value from within this. So whenever you have a value, I have the value set over here. It's value C++, the value is Python, the value is Java, and I have the container right here. So this is my text box 1 container that I have, and I'll be taking the value from this as well. Okay, so now that you've added the code button listeners that will take the language and the question text, but when you go over here and you see and you try clicking the button, nothing is happening. This is because first, we don't have an event that is getting triggered right now, or we don't have a method to show if it's working right now. And second is that we have not connected the button itself to the function that we have, so that is why it's not working already. So first step should be to connect the button to the function itself, and then maybe we can put in an alert there so that we can see whether it's working or not. And it's just to make things easier for you. For people who are on Chrome, you can directly put in a console.log. You can go to the inspect elements part of it and see whether it's working or not. For people who are on Mac and you don't have dev tools enabled on top of it, you can just put in an alert to see that it's working. So what I'll do is I'll go over here and I will put in alert, and for alert I'll pass in the question text and I'll pass in the language. And what I have to do is I also have to call the button. So in order to call the button, I have the button over here. I'll go down and add an on click listener. On click listener is there, and I'll go on handle generate code clicks, and I think we are good to go with this. I'll just hit command S and my code is up. So if I hit on generate code, it's showing as empty because I don't have anything typed over here, or we don't have any language selected over here. So I'll just type in this is a sample code that I write, and I'll select a language. I'll go ahead and select maybe JavaScript. I'll generate code. So this is a sample code that I write. So if you can notice, this is visible, but the JavaScript part of it is not visible. So what I'll do is I will separate this out into multiple languages. So I'll add a plus within it, and this means that I will be showing both question text and languages as well. So I'll hit again, type something, and I'll select a language and generate code. So CTAS is coming from there and the C hash is coming from here. So in short, both of it are visible, and we have built the complete functionality for the code button as well. Now the only part that's remaining is we'll be sending a fetch request to the backend, and we'll be receiving a response from the WorqHat server that yes, this is what you have asked for, and this is the response that I have come up with. Alright, so I'll just remove this command X and I'll go to the documentation and see what's there next. So I missed it. Where did we go? Right, we have installed Monaco editor. We have this part ready. We have the APIs. Now we have to create a async function for fetching the request. Now what are async and awaits? For most people who have been into programming for so long, you might be knowing what async and awaits are, but in short, async and await is when you are saying it's an asynchronous request that we're sending to the backend, and you're going to wait for a response, because until unless you get a response from the backend server that you have, you should not go ahead with the processes in front. Otherwise, what will happen is you might come up with an error, you might send back an empty response or something or other should happen, and you should be always ready to handle any error that comes from the backend. So that is why we put in asynchronous request, where we wait for the response before we go ahead with the process. So I'll again copy this code and I'll explain it to you how it works. So I'll have another function, async function, that creates this thing. So what does this do is I have an API endpoint. This is the WorqHatAI endpoint. In order to understand more about how WorqHatAI endpoint works, you can directly go to our documentation, or you can visit our API references, and I'll just go to my API references and I'll go to text generation AI and the icon v2 model. So see, this is how your request should look like. For example, in JavaScript, it should always have all of this part. It should have an API key, it should have an org key. This is the endpoint that you will be sending the request to. In order to read more about what it is, you can go to the documentation and read about what AIcon v2 is and how it works, what are the different use cases for it, and how you can customize it to meet your own requirements. These models are very highly customizable, where you can send in your own training data as well. It currently supports 20,000 words in a single request, but there are larger models as well from the WorqHat's end, where you can have around 200,000 words in the complete training process as well. You can even pass millions of data into the training process by passing it in the form of simple PDFs, text documents, and even JSON and CSV files. So there are a lot of things that you can do with the WorqHatAI endpoints, and this is just a tip of the iceberg that we are working with right now. Now, again, API keys and org keys are very important for the WorqHatAI endpoints to work. API keys identify you as a user, and the org key identifies the workspace that you are currently working with. So just for the sake of simplicity, I had console.log the API key, and the prompt or the command is the unit that will be sent to the API model, that this is what my user has asked, and the AI model will process the request that you have and send you back a response. And this is the request, and it's a simple JSON request that you send to the backend. So over here I have passed only question and randomness. So if I move into the documentation, what you will see is that you can pass in multiple content as well. You can pass in a history object. So suppose you have a chatbot that you're building and you want to maintain the history of the conversation that the users are having, so you can directly pass it as a history object in the form of a key value pair, where the question is the key and the answer is the value. And you can ask the AI model to preserve the history as well. So when the history is being preserved, the key value pair will be taken into consideration when the AI model is answering. And the question is the part where you are asking a question to the model. Randomness, now we know that most of the models these days are very hallucinating. They hallucinate on any question that you ask them, and that's why we wanted to give users a chance to control the amount of hallucination it has. So we allow users to set this value from 0 to 1, and by default we put it as 0.4 because we need to put in some creativity into what the AI model thinks. But again, in order to make sure that the AI model is very stringent and is very strict to what you have asked, you can set this value at a very lower rate, somewhere at 0.1. If you want it to be completely flexible and to answer on the basis of anything maybe solely related to what you have asked, you can put it at a higher value at 0.9 and 1. And training data is where you can pass multiple amount of content in the form of training data, that this is what the AI model should answer on top of. So that is what we pass in the form of training data. We won't be taking all of that into consideration as a scope of this project. Right now we'll be only focusing on the question and the randomness part of it. So here I have sent the prompt as the question and I have sent the randomness as 0.4. I might set it a bit lower to make sure that it does not move out of track a bit. So I have set it as 0.3. Now I have sent a response and I'm waiting for a response right now. So I've sent a fetch request and I've sent a fetch request to the API endpoint that I have, and I've sent the request options as well. So I'll be waiting for this response, and I've called fetch AI response with the language and the question over here. So moving on, and whenever the response comes back, as you will be able to see in the documentation as well, the response comes back in the form of a JSON object, where it comes back the content. It has the ID of the request that has been processed. This is very important as it helps us to troubleshoot any issues that you might have come up with at any point of your journey or any request that you might have. Processing count is the number of words that the AI model has processed. This is what takes billing into consideration, but we know that all of you are young developers and all of you are working with a lot of innovative kinds of projects. So that is why we have given every developer or every new user a chance to have up to 10,000 words for free. So you can keep using it until you hit the 10,000 words limit, and beyond that it's 40 paisa for per 1,000 words. So we have made sure that it's affordable and cost effective for anyone who's looking to build production grade applications. And the timestamp actually denotes the time at which the request was processed. So moving on, I think my response part of it is complete as well. So what I'll do is I'll move to the next part of the code now. Now what does the next part of my code say? My next part of the code says that I need to add my API key and the WorqHat keys. So what I'll do is I'll go over here, I'll create a .env file at the root of the project. So I'll create a new file and I'll make it as .env. The .env file is ready. I'll paste in my API key and the WorqHat keys. Now where do I get the API key and the WorqHat keys? In order to get your API key and the WorqHat keys, you need to visit your WorqHat account that you create. It's very easy to sign up. I'll leave the link to joining the WorqHat account down below. So you just visit app.worqhat. You just visit worqhat.com. I'll give you a demo. So you go to worqhat.com. You will find the get started with APIs button over here. Click on the get started with APIs, and I'll just log in over here. I already have an account. I'll just log into my account. I'm sorry. I will just log into my account. I'll sign in, and right, I can see all the workspaces that I've created in the past, but I want to create a new workspace for this. So I'll create a code demo. I'll put in as code demo, and we want to make sure that your systems are fast, really fast. That is why what we have done is we have allowed users to put in multiple data centers across the world so that you can actually create faster application and reduce the request timings. I am based out of Pune in India, so the closest server that I have is Mumbai, or I can choose Singapore as well. That's pretty close, but I'll choose Mumbai as of now because that's my fastest server that I have. This is returning my error, so I'll just remove this and we are good to go. Create code demo workspace. I will start off with a free trial and I'll just wait while it creates my workspace. Yeah, my workspace is ready. This completely spins up a separate server for you so that you can start working with it and you can build complex applications as well. And all of it is hosted on a separate server that has been dedicated for you so that you don't have any speed affecting you. That is how we provide users response in within 1.5 seconds. If you are working with lengthy responses, that takes up to 2 to 3 seconds, but that's the fastest that we can. We are also looking to make it much more faster than that, looking for millisecond approaches to responses, but as of now we are working with that speed. And since you have your own separate server hosted on the cloud, this makes the process much more faster and allows you to host your own custom domains as well. So I'll just log in with sagnik@worqhat.com. I'll sign in. Right, so I'm good to go. I have come to my code demo workspace. I'll go and hit on try now. And we are also coming up with an API playground. That is, you can go to the API playground and start working with how the API should work. Send in sample prompts to see how each of the prompts work and how the things happen. But as of now, I'll just copy the WorqHat key. The WorqHat key is copied. I'll paste it on the application. I'll paste the WorqHat key over here. Command V. I'll put it with an apostrophe. I'm so sorry. This is what happens when you suddenly shift from a Windows device to a Mac OS device. Everything seems new. I'll go back here and I'll copy my API key as well. Right. And my API keys are up. I'll just check whether my application is working or not. My application is working well. So my API keys are up. Everything is up. Now I need to just make sure that I can send the request to my backend and receive a response. So yeah, these are some documents that you can refer to when you're building this application. I'll leave a link to everything in the description so it's easier for you to build. So once I have the API keys and the WorqHat keys, what I need to do is I need to set it in my next.config. Now what is next.config.js? That is actually the configuration file for a NextJS application. And this is where I will call my values from the process.env that I have. So if you look over here and you see next.config, again, different people have different ways of setting up the env files. This is how I have always set up my env files. It helps me to maintain my env files in a much more safer way and in a much more better way. But again, you might have your own way, but we don't generally suggest you have to use process.env. But when we have built this application, we have made sure that it's secure, and I'll show you how we actually work on making it secure. But it's to be safer, or to be on the safer side, we prefer that you put it on a process.env file. But even if you don't put it on a process.env file, rest assured that your API keys are safe, and I'll show you how once we add this process.env file to it. Now I'll have to change my env file, add in my env file to the next.js. So I'll just copy this and put it on a next.config.js, control A, control V. So this is nothing but I've just added in the env files over here, and since I have not installed .env, as you can see the error, I've not installed .env yet, so this has crashed. So again, I think this is a self-explanatory that you need to install .env in order to make env files and process.env processes work. Process.env is nothing but this is a file that you don't push to GitHub repository or any cloud-based sources, and this is a secret file that we have on your own devices. So I'll just install npm install.env, and my env file is up, and I'll just start npm run dev again, and my code is up. I don't need to open it again, but I might have to hit a refresh over here because this I got. Command R. I'll just wait till it loads up and it's back on track. And in the meanwhile, my code has started running. It has been compiled. This has also come up. Now I'll go to the code, this thing that I have. Explanation on why this is happening and how it's happening. Now we need to create the command that is being sent. Now the thing that happens with most language models these days is the famous term that we have come up with, prompt engineering. We have made sure that you don't have to go into the complexities and the rabbit hole of prompt engineering. We have to create the perfect prompt to get the perfect response. No, you don't have to do that. Our models work in a way that you provide it an example of what you want, and our models keep responding to you in the exact way that you have mentioned in the example. That is just because we want to make sure that you can train the model according to the way you want to. If you don't want to pass in an example, the model will work with the examples that it has been pre-trained with and might come up with a format that is not suitable for you, or you might not like the format. So in order to make sure and to be on the safer side, we have made sure you can guide how the responses come in. So we have a separate function. We have created a separate function itself in order to create the prompt, and I'll copy it and I'll paste it over here in my index.js. Right, explaining the code. So return endent. I have to install endent as well. What is endent? Endent is the way where you can, I've explained it over here as well. Endent is used in order to make sure that you're formatting the command. It's a template literal tag. That is, we don't want to add in any white spaces. We don't want to add in any special characters. We want to we want to format the request in a particular single multi-line languages. We don't want to put in enters, we don't want to put in spaces and tabs and so on and so forth. So that's why we have always used endent. So in order to use endent, I think this is working. Npm install endent. I'll have to do npm install endent. Probably indent is working. I think it's working. So I don't have to install npm install endent. That's cool. So what I'll do is I'll explain the code here, what we have done. So this is how I am guiding the ML model. This is an example that I want the model to transform from natural language to JavaScript. So I've asked it to print the numbers from 0 to 9, and the JavaScript code for it is this. So similarly, I'll pass in the natural language code and my input code, what I want the language of the code to be in. It can be JavaScript, it can be Ruby, it can be C++, anything else. And then I'll have the language code that is, yes, this is the language that I want and this is what I want from you. And I think my function is ready as well. Now I have to send the request to the create prompt. Now when I have to create the create prompt button, I have to put it over here, right? I think that's much more self-explanatory. So what I'll do is I will replace this line that I have with create prompt, and I'll pass in my two variables. Now what are the variables that I'll be receiving over here? I have the input language and the input code. Now what is my input code? Input code is the question that I have asked, and input language is the language that I want my AI model to answer in. So create prompt will receive input language. So input language will essentially be my selected language. This is how functions are called from another function. So before we start off with this, if you are aware of how function calling happens, well and good. If not, please do go stop this video, pause this video for a while, see how you can call multiple functions in JavaScript, and then come back over here again, and I'll pass the question as well. So I think this mostly talks about how the prompt can be created. Now what do I have to do next? There's nothing else I have to do. I have to just wait for the response, right? Oh right, I have to handle the generate code click. So what I'm doing is I'm waiting for the fetch response. All right, I'm waiting for the response data, and if my response data contains success, again, how do I see that it's a success? You can see that there is a status success over here. In case the response failed, it will be a status 404 or a status error. In all cases, what you can do is you can put in a if else clause, that if it's success, then I'll show this thing on my code editor. If it's an error, I'll not show it. I'll just log an error. I'll just show that it's an error. So that's what we are doing it over here. So what I'm doing is I'm waiting for the fetch response, and I will go ahead and add it over here into my main code base. So I've already handled my generate code clicks, but I haven't put in this part where I'll be handling what my response should be. So this essentially does is I'll put it in over here, and I'm calling for fetch AI response. Fetch AI response is a function we have declared over here, and it receives the two parameters, selected language and question. Now it makes sense why we decided to always write from bottom to top, because I keep calling in functions that are on the top in another function that is present below. So that's why I keep declaring in such a way, and I think this makes sense. Also, in case you're very excited to try this out, what I would suggest you is you can go ahead and try out the AI models right within our API references that is within the documentation itself. So just for an example, what I'll do is I'll just copy the env file codes. I'll copy my API key. I'll copy it, command C. I'll paste it over here, command V. I'll copy this part of it as well, command C, paste it there, command V. I'll go to the body. I don't have a history object. I don't want to preserve the history. Hello. I don't have a training data, and I want to set the randomness as 0.8, which means that it will be answering anything it wants to answer me. I'll set it as 1, right? And what I'll do is, so this means that my answer will be completely random, and there's no connection with what the answer comes to a question that I have. So I'll just send the request, and I'll wait for a response, and see, my response is here. Hello, how can I assist you today? So it has completely processed 36 words in order to come up with a response, and this is how we work. Now this actually takes into account the answer that is there, the question that is there, and the formatting part of it that we do on the backend to make sure that the question that you asked is much more, the answer that returns is much more viable and much more closer to what you have asked, and that is what we do at the backend. So that is why this is how we count the number of words that we have. And moving on to the code over here, now I'm sure that my code works. I know that my API key and the org key that I have right now with me are correct, and this is something that I have to implement on my front end part of it on my application itself. So this is what we'll be working with now. And moving on, I have copied the code base over here. I've copied the API keys. I've waited for the response data, and I'm waiting for the fetch AI response. Now that our application is ready and we are ready to send requests to the backend and receive response from there, now we need to make sure that the responses that we get are handled properly and they're displayed on the application itself. So for that we use use states. So for use state you have to use npm install, or sorry, it's already present with the React testing. So you can directly use import use state from the React tools that we have. So what's use state? Use state helps us to make sure that we can transfer the state of the response, or put in a particular state for a object. So maybe you have a button and you want to change the state of it from say A to B. That is the case when we use useState. So in order to do that, what I'll do is I'll create the useState function. So I've imported that. I'll create the useState function here. I'll command C it and command V it, and I will place it in my okay, I have it over here. I've presented over here. Now where do I want my generated code and where do I want my selected language to be visible? I want it to be visible in my editor, right? My editor had default functions present that it should only show JavaScript, and it was only showing a standard code base. Now I want to show in a dynamic code over there depending on what the function has happened. So I'll go ahead and put in over here in language, I'll put in selected language, and in the generated code it should be a default value. For the value I'll put in generated code. So I'll put in generated code, and this thing is done. Now I need to put the values in there. Now to put the values in there, we use set function. So what I'll do is I'll use the set selected language, and I'll put in the language as the what's the language I have is the selected language. Set select language is language, right? It's this language that I have here. I'll put it in there. And for the response that I have, if my response is a success, I will put in my response as set generated code. I'll put in the code base over there, and that is response code. So what I'm doing, I'm just splitting the value, and once you split a value by backticks, it presents it in 3 parts: 0, 1 and 2. So I want to take the object between these two splits. So this will be exactly 1 in the array of objects that I have. So I'll put in response code over here, and if it's not available, I'll set the set generated code as I am sorry, we were unable to generate a code for you, please try again later. And probably I'll just copy this and paste it there again. I think that's the easier part. Right, I'll just copy it and paste it, and I'll hit Command S. So I think I have handled both generated code, I have handled set generated code, I have handled selected language and set selected language as well. So I'll just go here and I'll just hit Command R to check if it's working or not, and it's working. Now I'll send a request. So maybe sum of numbers from 1 to 9, and I want it in JavaScript. So I'll send a request generate code, and for some reason it's not being able to generate the code. I need to check why this is happening. But it does not include this. So what I'll do is I'll just get done with this. I don't want this part. I'll just keep it like here, and if my answer is there. Response code is not available. Very good. So what's the response code? I'm so sorry. So it should be response data dot what do I get over here? I'm sorry, not this. I get content. So it's response data dot content. Command S. I'll send a request again. Sum of numbers from 1 to 9. Select language JavaScript. I'll generate the code, and here you go. Your code is here and it's working right now. So that is what we had to focus on. And so I think going ahead, I think the issue that happened over here was key. The response that came back from I just undid back to what we had. And if you see over here, we had made sure if it includes the backticks, then only it should show the generated code, and otherwise it should not show the generated code. And that is why I think I made the error, because it just returned me the code and not any associated description with it, so it did not contain any backticks within it. So what I can do is to make it foolproof and to make it a safer response, it should always return a response. So irrespective of it contains if it contains the backticks within it or not, it should show a response. So right now I've modified the code to make sure that if it has backticks, it will split it and just show the code within it. If it doesn't have backticks, just show the entire thing. So I think now I can give it a shot again. Let's do something more complicated by a bubble sort, and say JavaScript happens to be my favorite language, but I'll do it in something else. I'll do it and say C hash. Let's try something complicated. So is it working? We need to add a loading button in order to make sure that the code comes properly or not. So that's something that's important. Alright, so we'll do that right now. Let's add a loading button to this generate code. So again, how does it work? I think we have mentioned that over here as well. Do I have? Yes, we have mentioned it. So you can just set a constant loading and set loading, and you can set an initial state key. Here the initial state was empty state. Here you can set an initial state as false. So I'll just command C it, and so since my initial state is false, it will not show any loading data. Alright, and I have to add the loading details to my button. So every time I am loading it, so right now when my button is clicked, it should be a set loading as true. Set loading as true. My set loading should be true. But once my answer has been generated, once my response has been generated, this should go ahead and become set loading as false. That is, my response has been generated and the process is not being loaded anymore. So I can set it as false. Yeah, set loading as false. Again, I'll set the set loading false over here as well. So this is just no note that once my process has started, I'll format this code, is easy for you to understand. Right. Once my process has started, my loading icon should be visible. That is, my set loading is true. Once my answer has been generated, my response has come, I'll set the set loading as false. So after I've set the generated code, my button has been set to false. Again, generated code, my button has been set to false. Irrespective of whether we're getting an error, it should not be a loading button anymore. Alright, and anything else? And we need to add this to the button as well. So when we add it to a button, so what you do is you handle the on click over here, but for the content within it, you have to put in the loading state. So if it's loading, now in order to explain this, what does it say? I have declared loading as the use state. So if my loading is true, then I have to put it as writing a code. So that is why we declared when here set loading as true. So when this function is getting triggered, that is my set loading is true, I'll write there writing a code. But once my set loading is false, I'll just write generated code. So I think this is the only line that I need to add over here as the content within the button that I have, and I'll just paste it over here, and I'll go for command B, command S, and my project is ready. So I'll just go over here and I'll just add a question like bubbles. What about bubble sort in JavaScript? I have never tried it. I mean, I did it when we were sitting for interviews, but bubble sort in JavaScript, and I'll see the loading state is there and it's working correctly as I wanted it to work. I'm waiting for the code, and my code is here. And this is how we can build this entire application. Now, once you have completed building your application, what you can do is you can push it directly to your GitHub repository if you're working on your own IDs. Once you have pushed it to a repository, what you can do is you can push it up to Vercel to deploy it and showcase your project with your friends. You have 10,000 free words, so a lot of people can use your product and they can see what you have built, what you are building, and your innovativeness. You can change the design, you can add in more features. Maybe you can add features of where users can log in and store their store their progress, where people can come and see what projects people are working on. You can have a dashboard that allows you to keep a record of what people have generated, and so on and so on. There are a lot of things that you can do with this, and we can't wait to see what you build with our WorqHatAI endpoints. But just to make sure, when you are submitting, there are a few standard processes that we have. So in case you are planning to submit this for for assessment and for grading, make sure that you add a WorqHat.json file to the root of the project. So add a file over there, right there, WorqHat.json, create the file, and the content of the file has been presented over here. Just add this content and push it. So you can add in multiple tags. You can add in your college name, you can add in your office name, you can add in your organization's name, you can add in anything that you want. Tag it for us, and you can help us understand. You can add in your feedback as well on how you find the AI models to be working, how you find this video, how you find the documentation, and if there's any way we can improvise on what we are offering. And the repository is already pre-answerable, but it will be great if you can answer or type in the name or the URL of the GitHub repository that you're working on. So for example, my GitHub repository here is, this is my GitHub repository that I have. I'll go to AI code generator, and this is the link of my GitHub repository. So I'll just copy this and paste it over here. You have to add in your email, because this is important, because all your certificates that are generated will be added to your email itself, and you'll receive the certificate in your email ID. So make sure that you add your email addresses correctly, and your name, because the name that you want to be displayed on your certificate. And in case you have deployed it to Vercel or GitHub Pages, please feel free to add the project deployment URL to the application itself. So I think that's more of it. That's everything that you can do with this. That's not everything that you can do with WorqHatAI. There are a lot of other features, there are a lot of other AI models that you can work with. We are also working on innovative playgrounds. We are working on a no-code application that takes away the entire stress of building complex applications like this, and you can just do it through conversations alone. So for that, you need to subscribe, join us on our social media channels at LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. Threads gets added as well. All we are there on every social media channel. Feel free to interact with us. If you do want to work with us, reach out to us via email. And I think that's all for this session, and I'll see you again in the next one. Till then, goodbye, take care.